We're talking about jobs, those job numbers, and the market's reaction. There's the big number, of course, 8.9%. That's the new unemployment rate. That is the lowest rate in almost 2 years. And yet, you got to do the economist thing. And yet, as we've seen, investors, they're not really buying this news. Here to talk about what it all means is the economist who's ranked Bloomberg best for his predictions about the job market, let's say analysis. David Semmens of Standard Chartered Bank is with us, and also Jeanne Branthover, Managing Director for Boyden Global Executive Search. In 2008, Bloomberg Business Week named Jeanne Branthover one of the world's most influential headhunters. Nice title. Great to have you with us. All right, David Semmens, let me start with you. So what did the jobs report say? I thought everyone was thinking that the unemployment rate would go up. It didn't go up. Why?
Right. It didn't go up simply because the participation rate didn't rise. The participation rate stayed flat.
Participation rate is the number of people that are actively in the job force.
So people who are either in work or unemployed and looking for work, that's the key decision. So when people are discouraged, they count themselves out of the labour force and don't get counted in the unemployment number. So when you look at the broader unemployment picture, that also saw unemployment come down. But really, what you want to look at here is it was the wage growth that we saw, or rather didn't see. Wages were flat month on month, and that's got to be a concern because you want to see a little bit of wage inflation, maybe not too much. But the fact that we didn't see any wage inflation, and we also didn't see hours worked improve after they dipped last month, which people accredited to the snow rather than there being any concerns in the labour market. And the fact that when you rise 0.1 of an hour, that's actually worth 400,000 jobs in terms of income for the economy. So that's a lot of jobs. People perhaps would have been a bit more encouraged if you'd seen the hours worked come up. But really the concern now, especially with the higher oil prices, is about the income side. The jobs, I can't really pick too much fault with it. It wasn't that far away from consensus.
Well, say that again. You can't pick too much fault with the job. Exactly. I was waiting for the optimistic news here. I mean, we go to 8.9%. And, you know, it's like we got to tease out the good part, right?
Right. I mean, basically, people's expectations were pretty good for the headline number. You did see state and local government cut 30,000 jobs. There were no cuts at the federal level. And this is really showing that state and local governments are getting their houses in order. They don't really have a choice about this. Most states have to balance their budgets. It's not an option. So they are going to be cutting back on their biggest overhead, which is, or the biggest variable overheads, which is payrolls.
I feel just lucky that I extracted that little positive glimmer of hope from you. Jeanne Branthover, are you seeing in your business, which is not the entire national labor market, I mean, are you seeing some increases in hiring? I mean, are people bullish on the job? Huge.
Since the beginning of December, we are seeing a tremendous increase in hiring, tremendous. Not just in financial services, but also in consumer products, also in retail. Across the board, all the people that are in Boyden are seeing an uptick in hiring, particularly at the senior levels. So what we're seeing, not only do they strategize about it, but they're actually opening searches and paying for hiring of people and really want to bring people on board at all levels.
So are they going to be paying more for them?
The recent moves that we've made, they're paying a lot more for them.
All right, we're going to talk about that in detail. We've got much more. Jeanne, you were talking about wages, because one of the things that David mentioned is that we're not seeing any wage growth. And indeed, when we take a look at the number of hours worked, that's really not showing any great improvement. But from your perspective and the job market that you deal with, you're saying no. You're seeing wage growth. We're
seeing wage growth, and we're seeing a huge wage change as far as how people are being compensated. So number one, the bases have been doubled. So that's fabulous for people that...
Base salaries are being doubled.
And according to Alan Johnson, it's going to be 10 to 15% more this year in base salaries. So that it really has been a huge improvement across the board in financial services for people. Instead of taking home a $200,000 base, they're taking home a $400,000 base.
A $400,000 base, why? Just because the way compensation is being structured, it's no longer backloaded?
But really think about it. It's what the government prefers. The government wants bases and not as much incentive. And in Wall Street, the bases have always historically been low. And then everything is prove it and you'll get it.
I thought you were going to say historically relatively low, right? 200,000, that's relatively low.
Right, relatively low in Wall Street.
That's relatively high.
Exactly. But now the bases have, not across the board, but most financial services firms have really done a best practice that it's been double. And now the bonuses were not horrible. So the big difference, though, is the amount of deferred compensation in the bonus, where really the war for talent right now is tougher than it's ever been because the employer is really worried, we're paying you well, but we're paying you over time. And companies are stealing people and paying that deferred equally. So people are saying, maybe I don't have to be so loyal if I can get more cash, a bigger base again after getting a double base, and still getting a good bonus where if they're matching what I got deferred, I can move somewhere else and get even more.
Wall Street workers not loyal? What a shock. All right.
It's amazing, right?
Well, in that context, though, are you seeing a lot of people move around?
We are seeing more movement than we've seen in 3 years. And movement at really top levels, movement there's companies that are just known to be more stable, better, and people really have chosen which ones those are. But more importantly, it's really about compensation. Every person understands that if they're going to get money, it's going to be over time. And if they want to wait for that, fine. But right now they're saying, you know what, I'm going to listen for the first time because I have to make sure I really can afford my life. If I have to wait 3 years deferred, cash is going to be tight for some of these people, even though they're making big money. On paper, they're making big money, but it may not pay for their cash flow as far as what they really have for a living.
David Semmens, I know that you cover the national job market, so give us a little bit of perspective in terms of the industry groups or the areas where you're seeing the job growth and where you're seeing the job wane.
We're also seeing growth in education and health, and education and health have been pretty robust really throughout the recession. We're still seeing some growth in manufacturing, saw a little bit in car and auto parks, which is encouraging. You saw very strong auto sales.
Right, Chrysler, Ford, GM, all coming out with automobile sales that beat analyst estimates, right?
Which is obviously a very big purchase, and it shows that consumers are more encouraged than they have been for a while, even though there are concerns, obviously, about the outlook for the oil price, which tends to weigh on car sales, but that didn't really factor into.
How worried are you about that, about the increase in gasoline prices? I mean, Deborah Costner was talking about a 17-cent per gallon increase at one service station on the New Jersey Turnpike. How concerned should economists be about this?
I mean, I think from my perspective, it's more, you see it's going to factor into the headline retail sales number, but when you look at the core, which is the underlying strength, we're going to expect it to have a little bit of an effect, but it shouldn't be a long-term effect. We would expect more of a step price increase. If you have a consistent increase in oil prices and gasoline continues to rise up steadily over the course of the next year, rather than a step increase and then becomes less volatile, then that will be far more of a concern with the additional volatility rather than having a steady price at maybe a higher level.
All right, now as a Bloomberg best, you get to look into the future a little bit for us. What effect do you think the state and local budget battles are going to have? Because we noted previously that if you wanted to go to a region where job growth was great, you go to Washington, D.C., federal workers, people being hired by the government. That's not necessarily the case in the future, is it?
Exactly, but we did see the federal government didn't cut any jobs.
Correct.
But then again, the outlook with the new political makeup does mean that we would expect there to be some further trimming. We do feel that the government as a whole, not just state and local, is going to be shedding payrolls in the forthcoming future as they become leaner, and that does seem to be the outlook. But then you really want private sector to be driving growth. You don't want the government to be the leader of employment.
But you don't want to get dependent on the government either, right?
Yes, exactly. You don't want that to be the case. And also, it goes back to what Jeanne was saying. When you look at the financial sector and law, and generally the higher end of the corporate boardroom, those people tend to see the turnaround first, and then it has a trickle-down effect, which unfortunately has a 12-month to 18-month lag to people like me, seeing the effects. And then that's when you see the economy turn around, because people who earn the big money will spend the big money.
I was going to say, you get that MBA and it all ends up being just a trickle-down economy anyway in a certain way. Jeanne Branthover, come in on the topic of the kinds of jobs that are available. What do people want to do, and do they still want to go work for the government? Because at one point we were saying people were looking to get their resume in the hands of, let's say, the Securities and Exchange Commission, no?
The answer is no. The people, now that they feel that the financial services industry is back, are once again, we thought people were going to say, I don't want to be here anymore, but that's not the case. Once it's been alive again. They want to jump in and be part of it. So basically, the areas that are hiring are really across the board, but wealth management, technology, asset management are all huge and still going to keep growing.
All right. I want to thank you very much, Jeanne Branthover, coming to us from Boyden Global Executive Search. David Semmens, a Bloomberg Best from Standard Chartered Bank. Always a pleasure.